and welcome to the Miko Bits show, and I'm your host, Miko Bits. So I've got a very exciting show for you today. We're going to talk with Mark Jeffrey, who is the founder and CEO of Guardian Circle. And I'm an advisor of Guardian Circle, full disclosure. But I think more importantly for this conversation, Mark and I are old friends from way back in the beginning of the internet when he was working on really cool virtual reality technology and a bunch of neat stuff involving Java, which I was doing some things with. So anyhow, this is a great day for me. I'm very excited to have this conversation. The thing I wanted to quickly say is that the video is opinion and not for, investment advice. So it's basically entertainment. And so please seek a duly licensed professional for investment advice. Before we start, if you're interested in Bitcoin and blockchain, please consider clicking that subscribe button and also click the bell so you can get notifications about future videos that I might post. Thank you. So without further ado, let's introduce Mark Jeffrey. Mark, how are you?
Hey, Miko, doing great. I'm very happy to be here. It's great to see you, as always.
Yeah, fantastic. So, DeFi, my God, what is happening? But before we dive into the meat, I'd love the audience to just get a bit of a gander about, so I guess the best way for me to start always is kind of, what was your blockchain moment, kind of briefly, and just to get a feeling, and then also a little bit about kind of Guardian Circle, what you're doing. And then I think the main topic, which will be kind of DeFi picks and pans. So, tell us a bit, how did you get into blockchain?
Yeah, I can remember the exact moment. I was CEO of a company called This Weekend, and I was partners with Jason Calacanis, and he had a show called This Week in Startups, which he still has. And on that show in 2011, he had a guy, I actually forget who it was, who was telling him about Bitcoin. And so I remember I was listening to the show in my office, and I remember thinking, well, that's interesting. And I remember Jason's reaction. His reaction was, "This is the most dangerous idea I've ever heard in my life," right? And so, that was an unusual thing for him to say. And I remember thinking, "Wow, that's like Flues. It's probably nothing." Flues was a digital currency that went nowhere in the '90s, but it was centralized, right? All these things were centralized before Bitcoin.
Sure.
So I dismissed it initially, thinking it was just another Flues clone. And then in 2013, both Brock Pierce and Michael Turpin were very excited about Bitcoin. And they're very, very different humans. And usually when I see people that different get excited about the same thing, that means it's something very interesting and I need to really have a deep look at it. So that's why I jumped in. And like many of us, it took me a while to kind of decipher what was going on from an engineering perspective. But when I finally got it, I had that aha buzzing in my head moment that all of us have had. And that was it. So in 2013 is kind of when I jumped in and didn't look back.
It's fantastic. And, I have a nickname for the LA Santa Monica scene, which is sort of, I call it the Brock chain. So it feels like there's a lot of folks down there connected with Brock Pierce. And obviously he's more like, Puerto Rico now. But the network still exists. And, it's great to hear that you're kind of coming in from that perspective. So I guess tell us just really quickly about Guardian Circle, which, from my perspective, as an advisor, it's exciting, right? Because it really decentralizes kind of real world personal security, in a very meaningful way. So I'd love to hear you describe it quickly.
Yeah, we talk about it as friends and family 911 or community emergency response. So you get the app, you guard up, like friending up with people that are also in the app with you. And then when you're in trouble, you hit an emergency alert button, which sends the alert out to all of those people that are guardians with you. And they're brought into a shared map in a chat room where they can figure out how best to help you. And the important thing to realize is all these people, but they probably don't know each other. So the magic is getting all these people to talk to one another about your emergency during your emergency. So that's the big thing.
So I'm so excited about this as kind of an eventual future state, right? Because one of the things that's so burning in our community and in our kind of country is this kind of passion for equal justice, right? And the apparatus of justice is really kind of demonstrably unequal. I think that the vast majority of Americans actually agree, right? Which is
Yeah,
great,
I
right?
think it's no question. Yeah.
From both sides of the political spectrum.
Totally true.
And it's hard for the data to lie, right? Like it's kind of, if you look at mass incarceration, if you look at just the statistics, it's like it's very hard to argue that there's unequal justice, right? And so the thing that I think people have become really exposed to and like legitimately horrified by is watching this tragedy of George Floyd and watching this kind of dehumanization, and it's excruciating. And a lot of people, it was very eye-opening for a lot of people to understand that there are Americans that don't actually feel any improvement. In fact, they feel unsafe around law enforcement, right? That the presence of law enforcement increases the feeling of unsafety, and it increases the feeling of like terror and possible like death, and so to me, the idea of kind of providing a mechanism for much more community oriented, and obviously I'm not talking about like Batman and vigilantes like shooting each other, like that's not what I'm talking about.
Neither are we, to be very, very clear. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like what's necessary is that it's and people who are in the kind of like trying to reorganize the way that emergency response is sort of budgeted is they're thinking about allocating different budgets around different kinds of responses, right? Because if you look at a situation, like what happened to Mr. McLean in Aurora, right? Like he's a kind of a special person, and he had his kind of issues. He was sort of it was an interesting person, and in a way, the way they responded to him was not. It just was, he had kind of met some mental health concerns, and it feels like a different group of people might have responded differently, had they had some knowledge about his condition, right? And I think what you're proposing is that there's a guardian group that actually knows Elijah McClain and they know what to do, right? They're like, oh, I know what's happening. Like he's having an episode or something's happening. The thing that's really sad about it is that it's operator error, right? Because the honest to God thing was that he wasn't even having a problem. He was freaking walking home. Like it wasn't even like he was having an episode and he was like attacking anyone. Like he was walking home, and then they just decided this kind of like stop and frisk type of thing, and it escalated, and it probably escalated in part because he wasn't just doing the things that you would expect him to do, but but the people didn't have any knowledge. They were like, why is this guy acting different? It must be something nefarious. Like let's choke him out, or I don't know what the logic was, but it was not good.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do that's sort of subtle is you can't really change the system easily unless you get a hold of the 911 system, right? The 911 system is where all these calls flow through.
Yeah.
And the city and the state have a monopoly on that. They have that choke point, right? That's theirs.
Yeah.
So what we do is we create another alternate universe 911 like environments that's actually upgraded because everyone's location is shared, right? You don't have location in 911. In fact, they don't know where you are if you call 911 from a mobile device. A lot of people don't know that. So, it's like an Uberized 911 like experience. So a lot more things are possible and a lot more people. And it's also a multi-party response as opposed to one central location just getting the call, right? You have 10 people, 20 people. So it's very different.
That's terrific. That's great. Well, so so I think it's, I just thought this is a very, it's a passion topic for me. So I thought it'd be great to kind of have you talk about it. But, let's kind of jump into the meat of the show. So, I think one of the things that's obviously a big movement is, DeFi, and mostly Ethereum based DeFi. And I think one of the things I love to talk to you about is kind of picks and pans, right? Which is, I just did a video about the Yam apocalypse, so obviously, you were kind of on Twitter saying that, hey, the jury's out. Like I'm neither for or against Yam. And I felt like you had a very logical, well-reasoned, cautionary perspective on it, and I think, so I think that kind of wisdom and experience would be, I'd love to kind of get some of the ideas that you're following, and how do you reason about the space, and what kind of moves are you making? Again, not investment advice, but just
Yeah, I'm happy
information.
to share everything I know.
I love
So,
it.
which, basically I started really digging into this world about 4 or 5 weeks ago. So, like many people, I'm very new. And when I started digging, it was not long after that Wi-Fi popped up on my radar, and I didn't really know much about it. And so again, like I started reading everything I could and talking to people on Twitter. And basically, what really got me were a couple things. One was the guy behind it, and Andre Cronje.
Yes.
I went back, I started reading his tweets, right? Going back, quite a ways. And he struck me as a very, very smart engineer. It felt kind of like Vitalik in the early days, right? Before he was famous at Ethereum,
I love
right?
what he
It
is
sort of
doing.
felt like that,
Oh,
right?
it's so exquisite.
And I don't know if,
Yeah, go ahead.
and I don't know if you know this, but I used to run a podcast called Bitcoin News Weekly. We interviewed Vitalik a couple weeks before the Ethereum ICO.
Ooh,
So in
wow.
that podcast, he's explaining to us what an ICO is. And you can hear me like not getting it because I'm like, wait, I send you Bitcoin and then what? Maybe you send me your coin. Like it was very sort of mysterious at the time. Right?
Oh, no, it was
So
beautiful because it was a Bitcoin ICO.
yes, well, you couldn't really do it on Ethereum, right? So
Sure.
you had to just send a Bitcoin and like, he said, well, we're going to make Ethereum. And then like a year and a half later, I actually got Ethereum, right?
Yeah,
But I know
EOS.
maybe I would never get it, right? We didn't know.
Yeah, EOS did their ICO on Ethereum, but Ethereum
Yes,
did their ICO on Bitcoin.
right. And it was very sort of manual, and you emailed stuff places, and it was crazy. So,
Awesome.
um, so with Andre, I kind of got that same vibe, and so it was really him that I was betting on. And then the second thing that I really liked was the supply was only 30,000 coins, and we didn't know whether it'd be locked there forever or not, but it kind of felt like it wouldn't go past 50,000 at any point. So when I did sort of the math out, at the point I decided to maybe do something. It was about $1,000 per coin, and as I did the math, which sounds like a ton, right? It sounds like, oh my God, you're insane if you buy one coin for $1,000. And what I figured out was that if you bought $10,000 worth of Wi-Fi at that moment, proportionally, given the supply of 30,000, it was like buying 3,000 Bitcoins for $6 each, right? Just sort
Yeah.
of, the same proportion of everything. And once I understood that, I was like, well, this is either absolutely nothing or it's an insane opportunity. So of course, I dove in and I did buy some. So, and I'm really, the more time passes, which it hasn't been much time, but a couple of weeks now, I'm pretty happy with the way things have gone. So, so Wi-Fi felt really good to me right from the outset, and I didn't feel like I was too late, right? So, so there was that. When I looked at Yam, I did not get that same sort of vibe from the people behind it. Now, I don't think they were bad, but I didn't get that. They weren't original. They were copying what someone else had done,
Yes.
right? So they weren't the geniuses coming up with all this stuff off the top of their heads, which meant they probably needed to copy things to continue to move forward. So I didn't like that. And also they had admittedly had no auditing of their contract, and that was just like I just felt like they were going to miss things, and it turned out that was the correct perception. So I wasn't against them. They're good people. They weren't scam artists, and I'm sorry it turned out poorly for them. That's never fun to watch. But I also felt like, in hindsight, I was like, well, from where I sat, I made the right decision. So that's kind of how I saw it.
Nice, very good. Yeah, I'm very excited about kind of Andre and his kind of leadership in defining DeFi culture. And he's
Yeah,
absolutely,
he's a good guy.
I mean, if you look at the blog post that introduced Yam, one of the things that it says in the blog post is it says something like the governance token has zero value, right? And it's sort of like, yeah, we know where that comes from. Like that's a direct quote of Andre, right? Like
Yeah.
so and it's the thing that's funny about it coming from a meme coin is that that their tongue is in their cheek, right? You know that they're just
Sure.
being coy, right? And they know that it's gonna pump, and that's what it did. But like, it's to me what it indicates is that what you have is a cultural leader, which is why I felt that it was so kind of, it was truly actually an emotional moment when he kind of gave gave the Yam founder his blessing after the Yam founder said that he had failed and that he was experiencing grief, and so Andre stepped in and said, hey, you deserve some thanks. And,
Yeah.
it's
Franze was very gracious. It was very heartening to see that. And it was clearly heartfelt, and there was clearly a lot of respect coming from Andre towards all those guys.
That's great, though. I mean, to me, what I'm really kind of circling around now is trying to get sort of your mindset and methodology. And I really like the thing that you're describing, right? Which is that you're really looking for this kind of leadership, and you're looking to try to understand, like, okay, well, who is behind this thing? So, one of the things that I'm starting to see more kind of anonymous projects, right? So if you look at like Thorchain, like that's kind of like not aggressively, but it's kind of mostly anonymous. It's a bit like the Ramones, like everyone's got the name Ramon. It's probably not really them, so it's sort of a pseudonymous type of collective. I kind of looked under the hood of this thing called Lid. So Lid is kind of
under the lid, as it were.
Yeah,
yes.
And I looked at Lid, and Lid is like anonymous, and their defense of that was oh, well, Bitcoin's anonymous and Satoshi was anonymous, and I'm kind of like, that is bad.
Not for something like this, right? So it's different for this.
I'm a little unhappy about that. So it sounds to me like you're actually thinking quite a lot about like who is this, like who's doing this.
I definitely want to know who's behind it. I look at these things as startups, right? We're really angel investing in startups. I mean, we are. It's just everything is structured differently, and there's always on liquidity, right? So we don't have to wait for an exit event like an IPO or something, and hopefully there's immediate flow of cash from, if you're doing a DeFi pooled kind of thing like what Wi-Fi is doing, there's immediate revenue that comes back to you, right?
Let's look at different lenses then. Like maybe since we're kind of playing picks and pans, like maybe we can throw a bunch of tickers out and see what you think. Like for example, like Link. Like, what's your take? I mean, you can't not have an opinion. So
yeah, I like Link. I mean, I that was when I started studying this space, that was one of the first things I bought some of, and I'm very happy. Clearly, I'm very happy that I did. Right, so. Link was one of those things that struck me that, and I remember you talking a lot about like, well, the oracles problem has to get solved. It's all about oracles, and I didn't really quite get why that was. And then after I read through Link, I was like, oh, okay, so it's hard for blockchains to talk to the outside world.
Oh man, the stakes on oracles are massive, right? Because to me, the thing that, I mean, to pardon my French, but like the question becomes like, is blockchain just this weird like circle jerk, or is blockchain something that like is going to change the world? And the difference is going to be whether off-chain data comes onto the chain or not, right? Because if off-chain data cannot come onto the chain, then like, what are we doing this for? Like, in a sense, like there's still applications that are very deeply meaningful, like Bitcoin, right? So like you can still do Bitcoin, but the thing is that, and you can kind of do Ethereum, and you can kind of do Ethereum DeFi, but like how much DeFi can you do? Like, almost all of DeFi you can't do, because you actually need pricing oracles, right? And so things start to get more and more and more reliant.
Well, so let's just macro comment on that, because I think this is an important point you're making.
Yeah.
What's really driving this whole world of DeFi? People trying to make money, right? Yes. That's obviously what's driving it. Yes. So, and in all of DeFi, some estimates are there's only 8,000 people, and that's maybe debatable. I think it's more. But one thing that's clear is that 2,000 people are driving like 90% of the actual money that's flowing around.
Yes.
So 2,000 whales who are sort of moving this stuff around.
Yes.
And sort of underneath things like Wi-Fi are two things. There's exchanges. So people are betting on one coin or another. And then the other thing is lending. So, there's Compound, there's Aave. These things where people are lending money out, and the exchanges are what's driving it. So it's still, and what's driving the need to borrow money? Well, you want to borrow it so that you can go buy coins on an exchange, and then they make money and then come back and you've made a profit kind of on margin, right? So this whole thing is very circular. It is, if you look at the entire ecosystem right now, it's kind of a big giant snake eating its own tail today. And even things like Link, it's true that these API oracles are valuable, but what are the only oracles available right now? Coin prices. So even that is part of the big snake eating its tail, right? So
Yes. Yes.
so I think we're stuck in this little bubble universe right now. And I
Yeah.
don't mean that in the financial bubble. I mean like a closed universe. We're not really interfacing to the consumer outside regular world yet. That
Sure.
bothers me.
Sure.
Fine.
No, no, no.
All of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that, yeah. So Oracle's a lot at stake. So, I kind of, in terms of like pocket picks, like I had Nick from Teller on my show.
Yeah.
I really liked him. I really felt like his approach was so kind of rationalist and level headed and sensible and logical, and he wasn't some kind of fundamentalist. He was just really trying to solve a practical problem. So, I like that one. I also I like Band.
I like Band also.
I'm gonna have the Band team on my show as well. So I think it'll be interesting. Because I feel like obviously they're kind of way behind something like a chain link with respect to kind of partnerships and adoption and this kind of thing. But like the thing that's really interesting becomes like how far behind and what's the relative valuation. So if you want some pocket picks like those, I think those are kind of interesting from that perspective.
Yeah, but Band has Sequoia and Binance backing, right? So it's kind of like the big sticks from both worlds, right? The non-coin world and the coin world. So I don't think Chainlink has anywhere near that kind of backing, although they've got mad adoption. But it's still, again, we're in sort of like a little micro tiny universe right now. So
yeah, and
I don't think it's a.
They just picked up a Coinbase listing. They also have kind of a neat partnership with CoinMarketCap, which of course is Binance, so that Binance investment is paying off. But like where you can kind of learn about the Band protocol and then you can earn Band tokens. It's kind of like earn.com from Coinbase, only it's actually being done by Binance on CoinMarketCap. So so all of those kinds of like partnerships, like they're meaningful. I mean, despite the fact that the world is like a DeFi world, like there's still exchanges and there's still Binance still exists and Coinbase still exists, and those are good.
Well, I also wonder whether, I mean, I think Ethereum right now is experiencing a lot of strain from the DeFi activity,
oh my
right?
God.
So we've seen that, right? You agree with me on that. So the transaction fees are through the roof, the congestion is through the roof, and it's just all of us and 8,000 of our friends, right?
I had a transaction last night that took over 40 minutes. I had another, the other night, I had a transaction where I was basically buying, I think it was like $76 worth of something. And the transaction fee was 70. I think it was like $77 or something. Like the transaction fee was worth more than the amount I was buying. So the whole thing is like really going bananas. So, so I think oracles. Do you have any other oracles in mind? I mean, it feels like one kind of.
I do. There is. Sorry, there is. So the point I wanted to make about Ethereum. So I do think it's possible that Ethereum will not be the final end all be all DeFi chain.
Yes.
And I think that's becoming readily apparent. Now, who might it be? It could have been EOS, but EOS has kind of done nothing.
Yes.
They had some of the characteristics necessary. It could have been Neo. If Neo had 3.0 out right now, one advantage Neo has is already today, they've separated out the gas token from the core Neo token, specifically to avoid this rising gas problem that's we're seeing in the Ethereum universe. That would never happen in the Neo universe. And Neo just started announcing a bunch of initiatives to try to play in this DeFi world, one of which is an oracle that they themselves are building. So they're building their own Neo on-chain, chain link band protocol.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So there's that. I do think Neo's behind, but I also think they've got time, and they think they've got time.
Do you follow like Solana? Like, what's your?
I've heard about Solana. I don't know a lot about Solana. I know that when I started talking about this on Twitter, Vinny Lingham said, "Yeah, it's going to be Solana." So
Vinny is a real bona fide. I would almost call it like DApp style user, right? As is Guardian Circle, right? And like and I was on a discussion with him, just a kind of coffee hour type of discussion, COVID coffee, so on Zoom, and he was just saying like, he and I got into kind of a fisticuffs over Ethereum because he took a perspective that's very pragmatic and user perspective, which is he was basically like, Ethereum doesn't cut it, like it's not going to work. And it's like, it won't work for you. Like, for Vinny, it's not going to work, which is fine, right? And he should look at alternatives, So I agree with you. And I think his take was kind of like, well, Kyle Samani, Multicoin, he's bullish on Solana, and Kyle's kind of very brilliant technically. So, and of course he and Vinny are partners. So Vinny is basically like, yeah, Solana. So I think the full circle of what you were discussing.
Yeah, it could be Solana. I mean, look, there's good people behind it. So I do think it's up for grabs right now. There's no question in my mind it's up for grabs.
Yeah, I'm going to have Solana on the show also. So I'm excited about the quality of folks that are kind of central to this discourse that are coming on the show. There are a lot of candidates. And I think, one of the candidates that kind of is in the wings is kind of Ethereum 2.0. But of course, when like it's kind of a it's never ending. So I think that's problematic. Like I think the problems that we're seeing are today, like they're now, like the everyone knows that right now it's bad. And the thing that I think is promising is to look at the Reddit scalability challenge. So I think relief is coming from that. I don't know if you're following that one, but
I have not been following that particularly.
It's so cool. So Reddit is basically like, well, we'd like to do stuff on Ethereum, but we actually have specific enterprise requirements because we're Reddit, right? I mean, maybe enterprise is the wrong word, but we have global requirements for scale, and we actually have a test harness, and we want you guys to run it and prove that you can supply us with like an Ethereum smart contract compatible, maybe layer 2. Like, they don't really care. They're like, I don't care if it's layer 2 or not. Like, you just need to run this stuff, and you need to run it really fast. And, here's the benchmark. And, and I think it was like 20 something different projects, applied. And you got like everyone under the sun who's good. So like, to me, I feel like relief is on the way because those are good projects. Those are really smart founders. They've incredibly technical people, and they've done a great job. So, I feel like that's where relief is going to come from. So I'm watching closely all of that. But, I guess so there might be some picks around that. Like there might be some picks around like, so Solana might be like, me personally, like, I'm interested. I haven't really made any moves, but from my perspective, like, Solana's a candidate, and I'm really looking forward to the interview because I really want to see kind of what they have to say for themselves and get the kind of feeling that you want to feel, right? Like you want to be like, okay, who are you? Like, why should I believe in you, right? That's your methodology. So,
that's what I want to say.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So as far as like scalability, that's an issue. So you described kind of a couple other key segments. So you were talking about lending, mentioned a few there, but like, another area that you talked about is kind of exchange, but let's do lending first. So do you have any kind of pocket picks in the lending zone? Like, who do you like in lending? I had Stani from Aave on my show, and like,
I watched that show. Great show.
I like Aave. It's a really, and it used to be ETH Lend, right? So like the history of it is so legitimate, and he's not a shoot from the hip person. Like he's from Finland. Like, it's legit. Like he's a super legit guy. So like, that felt good. Like in your way of measuring, it felt really good. Like just talking to him and being like, who are you? Like, why should I trust you? And it's like, wow.
Without a doubt. I was super impressed with Stani as well. And the more I started following him on Twitter immediately, so I've been sort of watching him now for a week or whatever that is. And the more, he's another one of those guys that the more I watch him, the more I like him and the more I'm impressed with him. And then I don't know a lot about the people behind Compound, except that
Robert Leshner. My associate in my fund is actually friends with him from before. So we do have a relationship there.
There's one guy that I'm really good friends with and he is very good friends with the founder of Compound.
Yep.
So I, by association, I suspect strongly that they're also equally as awesome. So
Compound is awesome. It's definitely a great project. And to me, the thing that's so exciting is that there is an opportunity for these base layer protocols, right? So there's an opportunity. It's not about kind of like the bleeding edge of yield. It's really about risk reward, and it's it's about kind of these platforms, right? So I feel like they've really established themselves well. So
question for you. I actually have a question for you about both Aave and Compound. Do you know how they're doing the lending and borrowing stuff that they're doing without having banking licenses, or do they actually have the banking license?
Oh,
I just don't know
man,
them.
no.
Do you know the answer to that?
The answer is that, as far as I know, the answer is they just are. Like,
yeah, okay, so they're like, this is not bank stuff, it's crypto stuff, it's decentralized. So they're just doing what they're doing, and we'll see where it goes.
I believe so.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't positive.
And the thing that's funny is nobody pronounces it DeFi, right?
Right.
But I like thinking.
But maybe they should.
I like thinking about this concept of defiance, right? Because there's an element, and it's an honest, bona fide element that creeped up in my previous kind of emergency Yampocalypse show that I just recorded, which is that part of the culture is very real. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Which is, like the middle fingers up, like they're definitely, and I would not characterize either Compound or Aave as being core in that mood, but like, the idea of like KYC AML and the idea of banking licenses, I think those are foreign ideas. I don't think that they're not native DeFi ideas.
I would agree. I think that, look, a lot of people don't like banks, and a lot of us have been screwed over by banks, and a lot of us didn't even realize we're being screwed over by banks until we understood banks. And all of a sudden we went, wait, this has been going on all this time? So I think there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of irritation. And I think
DeFi.
That's what's driving DeFi.
Yeah, agree. There's a big revolutionary fervor. And the thing that's so fascinating when you see that manifesting in a YAM is that, I said plenty of D, not enough Phi, and so there still has to be this feeling of responsibility, right? Because in a sense, it's like, oh, we're going to replace the financial system. And it's like, by shooting from the hip, and by not having audits, it's kind of maybe too far. Maybe too far.
That was a bit too far.
Come on back to the, to where it's
punishment
safe.
Occurred.
Yeah.
So like evolutionarily, the correct outcome.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but the correct outcome did occur. Right?
I'm there. Well, so lending. So I think that, so those are neat picks. Like, one of the things that I've observed though is that when you think about yield farming, there's this kind of extreme preference for upstarts, right? And that, in a way, like when you look at the current state of the DeFi world, like it creates a predisposition for innovators. Right. And that the methodology of innovation is absolutely kind of copy paste, right? Which is that there's not, and again, there's nothing wrong with that, right? So if you look at like the evolution of comp and, balancer, and then like M-stable, Wi-Fi, curve, like there's so much layering of the, evolutionary knowledge that kind of inspires further, and like Ampleforth to YAM and, these kinds of, and then on to, based, but I would say that like when you really look at all of these things, for me, like, do you have any like lending kind of pocket picks or any kind of like smaller things in that domain?
No, but I do have something else I want to talk about, and that is tendies. Oh. So you're aware of Tend, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe, have you heard of this? Have you heard of this or not?
No. I've heard the word, but I don't know.
Okay,
enough.
So tendies is another sort of meme coin, but there's more to it than just that. So it refers to chicken tenders, right? So you get the tendies, it's like a chicken McNugget, right? So everything's sort of chicken McNugget.
Heard about this.
Yeah. So, and the thing that I find interesting about it, and yes, I bought some tens just because.
Chicken farmers.
Yeah. So the way it works is you can either just buy it, or you can go to their site, and there's a bucket of 10 that starts at 0, and every second it like adds another 10, right? And it starts filling up with 10. Anyone at any time can empty that bucket. And emptying the bucket does 3 things. 1, gives 1% of that bucket to you, right? So you just get it because you emptied the bucket.
Oh my God.
That's A. B, of the remaining 100%, 50% is immediately burned. And then the other 50% goes into bucket B, a second bucket, which I'll get to in a second, right? So already there's this, I'm watching the number creep up, but I don't want to go too soon, because if I go too soon, I'll make, it'll cost more in Ethereum to get what's in the bucket than what I get back. So I'll lose money. So I don't want to do that.
Oh my God.
But I know everybody else is watching it, right? So it's got this interesting dynamic. The second bucket is for the top 50 Tend holders. So if you're a Tend whale in the top 50, anytime that second bucket is emptied, and anybody can empty it at any time, all 50 get an equal distribution from that bucket, right? So it encourages people to own and hold a lot of Tend. right? Because the rich
Oh
get richer,
man.
right?
Oh man.
So what I find interesting about this is all these other things that we've been discussing are imitation banking world things. We're trying to replicate something that exists in the traditional system,
Yeah.
just with crypto metaphors. This 10 thing is completely out of left field. Like the rules are just completely random. Like there's no, like it doesn't copy anything in the banking world, but it's perhaps arguably no more or less valid to do some new rule set which doesn't map to anything else we've ever encountered before. So it's very innovative in that sense, right? Even though it's goofy. So that's why I find it fascinating. And I think we're going to see more financial instruments that are only possible in crypto that don't map back to anything in the traditional financial system. And I think we're going to see a lot of innovation around that's more serious. So it won't be chicken tenders. It'll be actual serious things,
Well,
right?
I think that what you're alluding to in some ways is that evolutionary history is much more kind of tied to core gaming, right?
Yeah.
That it's much more of a game. Like I was talking with Zach of White Block, last night, and his whole point was kind of like, this is funner than playing a multiplayer game. Like DeFi is funner than multiplayer gaming, And so it's like,
right.
why would I spend time doing multiplayer gaming when I could play DeFi, right? So it's kind of like, and sometimes I use that word, right? So sometimes I'm like, oh, are you playing based or are you playing, and so playing becomes the verb as opposed to like, are you investing in it or providing liquidity to, so it's like, okay, so are you playing Tend? I mean, but so the question, arises though, which is kind of like, what is that about? And, is it kind of a long-term thing?
I don't think Tend is a long-term thing. I think, but I think it portends, I think it's the primordial or rudimentary form of something that's a long-term. It shows us that we can do new things and have new financial rules and instruments that just weren't possible in any other, system.
I feel like
in legacy systems.
I feel
right?
like it's coming from the other way though. What I mean is it's sort of like it's finance that's kind of become game like, right? But there are other things that are kind of games that are becoming more finance like, and so like I think that there's almost this kind of weird mating process going on in the DeFi world. So all that DNA is happening. So I think you mentioned like DEXs, like, decentralized exchange. So do you have any kind of plays, pocket picks, any kind of neat things to do in there?
I do. So obviously Uniswap has become incredibly interesting in the last 4 or 5 weeks, right?
Yeah.
I've heard between 140 and 300 million in volume, daily volume.
Yeah, Uniswap is the king.
Yeah, so and the reason why is because it's so easy. You just show up on the site. The UI is ridiculously simple. There is no sign up. There are no fiat on ramps. There's no usernames. You just come there, swap, and boom, you're done. And then the liquidity providers that back that are what make that DEX work. Other DEXs that I've been a part of in the past have had very poor liquidity. Uniswap solved several problems at once. One of them being the liquidity through the automated market makers that are in turn powered by things like Wi-Fi, right? So that has become an incredibly successful world. However, they're missing fiat. There is no fiat on ramp into that system. You have to know how to use, Ethereum wallets. You have to be sort of a half engineer in order to even participate, right? The public can't participate in that.
Yeah.
On the other side of the fence, there are some great DEXs that have done some other things very well. Nash being one of my favorites. And that is a decentralized exchange, which is Ethereum, Neo, and EOS based. And now they have Bitcoin support. And they have gone to the trouble of getting licenses, money transmitter licenses in all 50 states. That's very rare. So even though they don't have the liquidity, even though they have anywhere near the size of Uniswap, they are better prepared to onboard regular users. So imagine if they put out a product, something along the lines of, hi, regular person from the real world. I've got this thing over here that you put in your money and you can make anywhere between 20% and 140% annual return. And just stick your money in the slot here and then come back every day. We'll tell you how much you've earned and what percentage. And you can withdraw your money at any time. You don't have to understand anything about how that works. That would be a giant giant hit. Who doesn't want to make 20 to 140% of their money, right? So just regular people have no way to do that. And in a world where banks are now, have negative interest rates or zero, that becomes incredibly valuable and interesting to people. So I do think that Nash has, they're a little ways off from releasing something like that, but I think that they've shown signs that they're headed that direction. So I think we're going to see that come out of them sometime in the next 3 to 6 months. And I also like Switcheo a lot. Switcheo does not have a fiat on-ramp, but they're very clever and innovative, and they move fast. So I think Switcheo does have a token as well. I do think Switcheo is going to do very well out of this. So although we haven't really heard much from them yet, I think we're about to.
So do you have any opinion about like Mooniswap?
I don't know much about. I haven't looked into them a lot, so I can't speak to that.
Okay. Obviously very Uniswap inspired, and and in a way like clearly like meme coin-esque, right? Because it's like moon and when moon and this kind of thing. So it's it's a tongue in cheek. How about 1inch?
I like 1inch. I played around with that one a little bit. It's a little bit more difficult than Uniswap. It's not like you just show up and it's not as simple, although it is still pretty simple. So I do think 1inch definitely appears to be another leader as well. So yeah, thumbs up on 1inch as well.
What about kind of aggregators? Do you have any thoughts about aggregators? Like for example, like there's UI aggregators, kind of like Zapperfy. So I had Nodar from Zapper on my show. So I like Zapper. Like it's really a nice. It's easy to use.
I use Zapper, so yeah, thumbs up on Zapper too. Yeah,
great.
Yeah, Zapper is how I interact with Wi-Fi a lot of times. So yeah,
that's fantastic. Any other kind of aggregator type tools?
There's one where you can see the yield. I think it's yieldfarming.info or something like that. It's just a pure text page that just shows, what the APR rate is and how much is in every pool in DeFi that's known about at that time. And I apologize, I think it's yieldfarming.info or something like that.
Great.
Very simple text site, like that as well.
That's cool. Any other kind of like tools or aggregators? Instadap? Any?
No other ones come to mind. Sorry, that's all I got for this show.
No problem. I definitely, I follow DeFi Dad. Like he's got a lot of great videos. He's got a Zapper video, but he's got all kinds of videos, and it's almost all of it is kind of screen sharing. So like to me, like he's a great go-to for just like resources, so you just like I kind of turn him on in the background. I kind of look at what he's doing. I'm kind of looking at what he's using, and it's sort of monkey see monkey do. So I really enjoy that. He's got, it's a very tutorial oriented. Well, that's cool. I mean any other largely missing segments? I mean, it feels like aggregators and dexes. It feels like lending, oracles. Any other big like missing segments?
No, I think we've covered it. Other than sort of a macro comment, which is, I did that one posting on Twitter, DeFi Explained Simply, and it was just simply me just regurgitating everything that I thought I knew about the space over the last 4 years. Right. So, but there was really one big giant point, and I found that a lot of people just don't even understand what it is. Right. So when you describe it as, look, there's this banking world, and bank world makes more money than anybody. Right. And they will take your money and they will give you 1% of what it is they're able to do with the dollar that you give them. And all these things are a robot that does the same thing that we can all give our money to, except we keep 99% of whatever is made, right? And the robot kind of keeps 1% for itself. And once you explain it like that, people's eyes light up and they're like, oh my God, I get what that means. And so that for a lot of people, that's being lost on a lot of people, I'm finding. So that tweet from resonated mostly because of that explanation, I think.
That's fantastic. And I feel like there's some really neat websites that kind of allow people to sort of get a better feeling of what they're getting into. So there's some more like ratings agencies and,
yeah,
it's all coming together.
Well, there's your show. So a lot of people are learning from your show.
This kind of conversation is so great from my perspective in terms of like the kind of audience that I tend to try to help, right? Which is I'm very interested in kind of like people who want to kind of gain knowledge through osmosis and through culture and kind of through buzzwords, and because a lot of like buzzwords, right, that DeFi tends to be very clicky, right? And so for me, I'm really interested in like trying to open it up, right, to because I feel like blockchain is like all about open source software, open data, like open participation, inclusion, and I feel like we all need to kind of like not be such a little dark clique of like nerds, like we need to share information. So
we do.
Your perspectives are really awesome, and I love your feelings about kind of really learning about the humans, because I think that's just irreplaceable, right? Like it's not like there's such a like people are kind of like trying to play this like, oh, it's all in the contracts and just read the contracts, and it's like it's not that's not it. It doesn't, we're not there yet. And like, the bottom line is that, there's always shenanigans, right? Like if you kind of hang out with the wrong people, they're going to perpetrate stuff on you. And like, that's just always going to be.
And there's holes in contracts as we found out last night. Right.
Yeah,
so
it's not so easy. Well, I've got a couple of like pocket picks to run by you. Like,
sure.
One of the ones I've been following, is Acropolis. So I don't know if you have any.
Acro.
Yeah. Acro.
No, I don't know much about that one, so I can't comment too much on that one just yet.
Okay, no problem.
I haven't studied everything yet, but I've studied.
No. I mean, I think it's super fair. One of the things that's so amazing about like this space is just the Cambrian explosion and the kind of constellation of things to follow. So like, it is dizzying. It's too much. So for sure, like.
And it moves so fast.
It's like a rocket, right? And it's kind of like, what?
Yam was around for 3 days, right? 3 days. There are fruit flies that live longer than yam.
Oh,
I mean, that was crazy.
I like that. And the fruit flies actually are on the yams. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it's too fast, right? It's too fast. Like, it's like, oh, Ampleforth. Oh no, it's yam. And it's like, oh, okay, now it's like based, so it's sort of like, okay, on to the next. Like, what's up with that? But, I think that, it's darn interesting. A meta is another one that I'm kind of keeping track of, so I definitely, I'm just kind of following along. One of the ones that's kind of, I'm still puzzling out is like Rune, because I think that it's a well-designed kind of token economic mechanism, but in the way that you described, like, that I get a little queasy when the founders tend to kind of stay pseudonymous or anonymous. Yeah. So I'm not really sure what to make of that. I mean, they're not going to be on my show unless they're kind of in a witness protection, the
bag over their head or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I like that. Bag over your head.
The unknown DeFi guy. Like,
I'll offer that. I'll offer that. You can wear a bag over your head and be on my show.
So, there's synthetics.
A grocery bag. Oh, synthetics. Yes.
We haven't talked about synthetics, SNX. So I did study that, and I do basically get how it works.
Yeah, I'm gonna have Kyle on my show too, by the way.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm looking forward to that.
Great.
And one of the things that bothers me about it, so for those who don't know, it's a way for you to own like a Bitcoin or any asset without really owning the asset. You own like this in-world clone of the real asset, right? So it's sort of like there's this holodeck, and there are synthetic Bitcoin, synthetic Ethereum, et cetera, that's only exists on this holodeck.
Yeah.
And the reason why you would own it, and really there's only one, is that there's less slippage between synthetic assets that don't have to cross all these boundaries of pools and transaction fees. Everything stays within the same little AOL-like pool, right?
UMA is doing something similar.
Yeah. So I get that. What bothers me about that is the synthetic Bitcoin that's created in their universe might be purchased with dollars or Ethereum. I guess you have to purchase an SNX. So someone might trade Ethereum for SNX to create their synthetic Bitcoin. Now, the 21 million Bitcoin that exists out here in the real world, that synthetic Bitcoin is 21 million and one, right? So it actually is not backed somehow. It's not like it's Bitcoin Tether where it's backed by a real Bitcoin somewhere. It's a new Bitcoin. And yet it supposedly maintains the same valuation as a real Bitcoin. So does that dilute the real Bitcoin pool? Like, how is there some relationship there? what happens if there are 21 million synthetic Bitcoins? Does that chop the value of all Bitcoins in half? So there are some things about this that bother me a little bit, right? So.
I think that's very bothersome, right? Because at the end of the day, like, we're talking about digital scarcity as being foundational, right? So if you're playing with that at some level, it becomes kind of queasy feeling. So I'll definitely kind of try to hold his feet to the fire over that topic.
Yeah, ask him about that. And also, in thinking about it, I'm like, I personally would not want to own anything other than the real asset. I don't want some synthetic version of it. I mean, if it costs the same, why wouldn't I just buy a real Bitcoin, right? So
do you have gold under your bed? Are you one of those guys?
No, I don't have gold. I actually don't have any gold. No, I have a little bit of silver, but it's mostly because I was at a conference and some guy was selling it, and I thought it was cool, so I bought one. But it's not. It's like $100 worth or something stupid like that.
You shouldn't tell us if you do.
Yeah, it's really not worth coming to get. Trust me.
You can always call Guardian Circle too. You can always press the button.
Yeah. And you have to go through me. So there's that.
Yeah, that's true. Don't mess. That's good. Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. I mean, I know we're joking around, obviously, but like, physical assets are a thing, and custody is a thing, and obviously this gets really synthetics gets kind of abstract from there. But I think, given their kind of grand sort of valuation and whatnot, like, it's hard to ignore. So, he's definitely someone to watch.
Clearly been successful, no doubt about it. And it is definitely of interest and probably a good bet. Well, so I can tell you that I participate on the Wi-Fi governance boards now.
Wow.
And we just voted to make Link our first pool that's going to come live here in the next few weeks. The second most popular choice was for SNX. So it looks like there'll be a Wi-Fi SNX liquidity pool that will come online very soon also. So yeah.
That's such a beautiful lens through which to view the whole DeFi ecosystem.
It really is.
And I love it, right? Because the thing that's so great is like, I like jokingly when Wi-Fi was kind of rocketing, I was telling people like, the reason why I bought Wi-Fi is I just can't wait to like vote on improvement proposals.
Right.
That's my main purpose.
Oddly, I really am voting on them. So
I know it's good. Like I feel proud. Like I feel like
most people that own Wi-Fi are voting. Like that's like cool. I guess that's really weird. Like we're a weird group or whatever. But yeah, I think we all sense this could be a giant. I mean, it's like a company we all own pieces of.
I think it's the result of the culture that's coming out of the individual leader, right? Like, much like Vitalik himself pumps out culture, right? Like whenever we see, like if you go to 1inch Exchange, right, they have this kind of like loading screen that's like a unicorn, right? And it's like, yeah, Vitalik wears unicorn t-shirts. Like, we know that this is all part of this cultural export from an individual, right? And to me, like Andre is that kind of I totally agree with you that he's the kind of person who just pumps out culture, right? It's basically, and the culture that he's building around Wi-Fi is the one you're describing, which is that like the people are actually stepping up and they're participating in decentralized governance, and and because they care about it and because that's a thing, it's not just a bunch of like greedy shills and
well, Andre keeps coming up with great new original ideas.
Amazing.
And he keeps writing good code. So we all feel like, yeah, dude, this is a dude we want to back and we want to own a piece of, and we want to make sure it goes the right way in every way we can.
Beautiful. Really good. Really good. Well, unfortunately, we bounced up on the top of the hour. I could definitely do this again. And, so let's revisit. Let's come back and do this.
Absolutely.
This is an evergreen show topic, right? It's definitely evergreen. And, and we're also happy to get updates about Guardian Circle because it's such a cool project.
Always happy to give them. Thanks for having me on, Miko.
Thanks so much. This is great. Thanks. Bye.